Hi everybody. I thought that I would take a little time to make a video for you because a few of you are struggling with the assessment worksheet. And I spent some time yesterday with one of your classmates, an hour actually, and we weren't just talking about this, but talking to your classmate and understanding what it was that was tripping her up helped me, I think, know how to talk to you about this. And it did seem to me in the classroom when I was going over this material that you understood what I was talking about, but sometimes between the time that we talk about something in the classroom and you sit down to work on it a week or 2 weeks later, if you've never done something before, some pieces of what you remember might have dissipated off into the ether. So I just want to go over this with you. I'm going to show you a way to look at this that I think might help you do this more easily and successfully. And if you still have questions, shoot me an email. Okay, so I have created three questions, or three descriptions, I guess, for each of these columns that you have to fill out. If you remember this sheet, basically you're looking to pull out something that has to do with operations, something that has to do with programming, and something that has to do with impacts. All right, I'm going to assume that you understand that operations is everything that goes into actually running your company, that programs are the actual services that you provide, and that social and other impacts are the impacts on lives, families, the system, the community, etc. I'm just going to run through a couple of examples for operations, and then you can translate that in and do the same exact activity thinking about programs and thinking about social impact. All right, so I'm going to use the example of your classmate because I talked it all through with her yesterday and I remember it pretty well, and that will help us. So her fake organization is a missionary organization, an organization that sends, okay, let's see, they have coffee shops in the US, and they use the proceeds to send missionaries to Mexico to help in small towns in whatever ways that those towns, they're going to connect with the churches down there and be as helpful as they can depending on what the community needs. All right, so operationally they're sending missionaries and they have to train their missionaries. So we're going to, let's start with this column one. The column one, you are looking backwards, and I think this is where some of you got thrown. For example, your classmate's question here was, what does the audience want to know? Her original question was how to train the missionaries. Well, how to train the missionaries is not an assessment question. It's a program question. It's definitely something she would need to know, but it's not something she would need to know to assess. It's something she would need to know to develop her program. So that kind of question is a front-end question. How are we going to do our program? And if we're training, how are we going to best, what are the best practices for training? An assessment is where we look backwards. What information do we need to find out from what we're already doing? In other words, you don't start assessing until after you've done the thing, or sometimes you can assess as you're doing it. But you're basically looking at what you are doing, either you're in the middle of doing or have already done, and see whether it works or whether you need to tweak it. So we changed the question from what kind of training would she need to do to whether the missionary training is actually working. All right, so column number one, this thing right here, is looking backwards. What do we need? What information? What do we want to know to make sure our programs and operations are succeeding? All right, so in this case, whether the missionary training is adequate, whether it's working. Now we come to column two, finding the answers. Oops. All right. No, it's finding the questions. Sorry, I think I did that and then changed my mind. All right, so finding the questions, basically what questions do we need to ask to know whether missionary training is working? We came up with a few different questions. Actually, she came up with like 8 questions, but I just put down 4 of them here. When you get to your location, did you feel like you had enough information to settle in? That might include things like, did you know where to get food? Did you know who your contact person was and how to contact them? Did you have enough information to get around in that little town? If there were buses, did you know how to get to, how to catch the bus? And did you have maps? All the things that you might need to settle in. And so the question is actually a bunch of little questions, right? So depending on what you want to know, what you might have to break it down into lots of little questions, or there might just be one or two questions. It just depends on what you want to know. In this case, whether the missionary training is working. One question you would want to ask is whether you had enough information when you got to your location to settle in comfortably. All right, so the second thing is to talk about their first, the question is, what was your first experience like working with your partners? How well did you feel you were prepared for that? And what else do you wish you would have known or been told before you got there? Okay, so these are kind of open-ended questions that let people talk about their experience and what they felt comfortable that they were ready for, and what else might have made them more comfortable. And the answer to what might have made them more comfortable would help the organization adjust their training so that future missionaries were more comfortable. Okay, and finally, what's your most rewarding activity so far? And that's good to know. You want to know whether or not they feel like they're making a difference, right? And maybe you would have asked something along those lines about making a difference, but a good question is an open-ended question in this case, because you're trying to get enough more information than yes or no. You need to know why. Okay, so now you've found a bunch of questions, and the question is, how are you going to get the answers to those questions? Well, you're looking for people's observations, feelings, and thoughts, so you need to talk right to those people. How can you talk to people? You can do interviews. You could do them by Zoom, like video, or you could do them by phone, or you can send them interview questions. You could do focus groups. If you have a whole lot of missionaries, if you're sending 50 people out, you may not, and they're in different locations, it may take you a lot of time. There may be time differences. I guess I should have said you could do your interviews in person. But my point is, if there's too many people to do one-on-one interviews, you might want to get some people together. And you could do that if they're all in one place, in person or by webcam. So you're talking about how will you collect it. You could send surveys, and you could ask them to make a video and just address these questions. There are probably other ways you could collect the information. All right, so collecting the answers is how do we best get the information to answer the questions that we've posed. So to recap, the first thing you want to know, the first thing the organization needs to know is whether the missionary training is working. To find that out, you have to ask the missionaries, did they have everything they needed? Is there anything more they would like to have? And we've divided that up into 4 different questions, but you could divide it up maybe into 10 questions. It depends on what you need to know. And then finally, now that you know what you want to ask them, how is the best way to collect that data? All right, now let's look at another operational question. We said that they're running coffee shops in the U.S. And using the proceeds to help their missionaries. So obviously you have to have good coffee, right? You have to have coffee that draws people into your coffee shops. So one operational question that they may want to check into is, do our customers like our coffee? So how are they going to find that out? So one way is to find out customer opinions, and another way is to check how you're doing in terms of your retail success with your neighbors down the street. Now I'm going to contend that, and here's finding the question. The question, or what do the customers think? I put customer opinion, but to put it in question form, what do the customers think about the taste of the coffee? And then let's put it in a question form, how are other nearby coffee shops doing compared to us? All All right, I think it's going to be very hard to get that second set of information. I think we could do it, but I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it today. So instead, I'm going to focus on this first one. What do the customers think about the taste of the coffee? That's a question we have. Then we have to figure out how are we going to answer that question. Well, one way we could answer that question is to give a short paper exit survey to everybody who comes in to buy our coffee. And maybe they just find out that people are leaving these exit surveys on the table or tossing them in the trash, and very few are taking them. So we might have to create an incentive for them to actually do the survey. Maybe give them a coupon for a free cup of coffee on their next visit, or $1 off their next purchase. Alternatively, we could hold a coffee tasting event where we basically have, like 4 different kinds of coffee, and we invite customers to take a little taste test in those little teeny cups of each kind of coffee and give us their opinion on what they like and why they like it. We could think of other ways to figure out what customer opinion of our coffee is, but these are 2, and I don't need you to go to the moon. I just want you to show me that you can identify an operational thing that needs to be assessed. In this case, whether the missionary training is working, whether customers like our coffee. You can figure out what questions you need to ask to answer those 2 needs that you need to assess. And finally, that you can tell me how you're going to collect that data. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. All right, that's a 12-minute introduction or revised going back over with you, and I hope that this will help you if you haven't finished this project. If you still have questions, please give me a call. Bye.